The Netherlands is the fourth largest adopting country from China. The United States obviously is the first, Canada, Spain, and then the Netherlands. In 2005, I believe almost 1,000 or almost 700 children were adopted by Netherlands from China. So it's a significant player in the Chinese adoption program. Adoption is business. Yeah. We conducted a survey in early 2006 where we had a woman in China call every orphanage that did international adoptions, and she posed herself as a married woman, mid-30s, unable to have her own child, looking to adopt a child. And she asked all the directors, over 300 directors, can I come to your orphanage and adopt a child? And 93% of the time, the directors said, we don't have any babies for you. Why not? You're an orphanage. Why don't you have babies? We do most of our adoptions internationally. And so the demand for these healthy babies by these orphanages to adopt internationally is very strong. Okay. Again, in China, there are kidnapping stories of children being kidnapped and sold to traffickers. That is not an uncommon event. Primarily what happened in Hunan is that the orphanage directors, in order to satisfy the international adoption program, purchased children from baby traffickers. They were not receiving enough children through normal means, and so they looked for other alternatives, and baby traffickers came forward and said, we can supply you with hundreds of babies. And the directors found that attractive and started buying children from 2002 up until the end of 2005. Based on the court documents and the trial, it appears that the 6 orphanages involved purchased upwards of 1,000 children from the traffickers over a period from 2002 to the end of 2005.
How did they fabricate that surrender documents?
Simply out of thin air. I mean, they would, the testimony in the trial by the office staff was that they would just pick finding locations and say that the child was found at that location, and then create the finding information, take it to the police. The police would then create the police report, which is actually, in normal circumstances, the first report, and then the orphanage draws their documentation from the police report. But in this case, it was inverted so that the orphanage would tell the police where the child was found. The police would then write up the report, turn it back into the orphanage, and then the orphanage would use that police report as the basis for their abandonment information in submitting it to the CCAA.
And so it becomes an official...
Becomes an official document, yeah, absolutely. Their incentive is to keep the program alive and
so they are not a good source.
No, they are the opposite of a good source. Their job is to make sure that the world, in particular, views the Chinese program as being a clean, legitimate program. That's their responsibility, and so consequently, any sort of if they were to find out instances of impropriety, they would eliminate those individuals, but they would not, do anything to broadcast that the events happened. Agencies are beholden to the CCAA. If an agency were to start investigating on their own, independently of any government agency, just to start asking questions, it wouldn't be long before that agency was basically kicked out of the Chinese adoption program. And so the agencies have an allegiance to the CCAA because they are beholden to them to continue their participation in the international adoption program and to provide children to their clients. We know that at least one child went to Canada, and if you have one exception, then you know that others went too. So when families adopt a child from China, they're presented with the finding information of, the finding report of where their child was found, and often that report will have the name of the person who found her. And in this case, for example, this family that adopted this child from Changning, one of the orphanages involved in the trafficking, the name of the finder in their report is the name of the trafficker that was convicted of trafficking. She was the main trafficker in the entire program. And so we know from this document and from this child that the children that were trafficked were adopted internationally with certainty. The children that were trafficked, and its numbers up to over 1,000 children that were brought into these orphanages, a lot of them went to the United States, a lot of them went to Canada, some of them went to Spain, and no doubt some of them went to Holland. It's just the way that the numbers play out. There's no way that the agencies in Holland can say that none of the children involved in the trafficking were adopted by Dutch families, because that's simply not a case that can be proven.
That's not true.
It's impossible to know if it is true or not true, because again, you can't get behind the wall of the stories of these individual kids. Well, if you look at the numbers of adoptions done by the world and by Holland, you would say that 5 to 6% of the children ended up in Holland. So about 50 kids are in the Netherlands that were trafficked into Hunan. No, not at all. The ratio of the number of children that were trafficked versus the number of children that were found legitimately is probably 1 to 1. They looked at doubling their output through trafficked children. So the vast, a significant percentage, up to 50% of the adoptions that took place out of Hengyang involved trafficked children. The only way for any agency, to say with certainty that none of their children were involved in the trafficking is for them to go back into the orphanage files, pull the police reports, interview the people that found the children, and verify that the story is accurate. Because the orphanages fabricated the finding information on the trafficked children. And it creates questions, and it removes that perfect storyline that they formulated in their mind and creates turmoil in their minds. And most families don't want to deal with that. They just want to keep it simple. Be able to tell their daughter one day, this is what happened, this is why it happened. They don't want to have to...
Adoption parents are afraid for another truth.
Yeah. In most cases, they're afraid to have another story come into their lives that's more complicated, that maybe involves birth parents not willingly giving up their children. These are all complicating issues that most adoptive families want to avoid. As an adoptive parent, it's my parental obligation to find the truth, wherever it is,
even if it's a nightmare.
Even if it's a nightmare.